According to Formula One Championship CEO Stefano Domenicali, the value of a Formula One entry has risen to the point that some teams are refusing bids for almost billions. And this has caused problems amongst teams wanting to join and the current teams on the grid due to the Concorde Agreement. Will we ever see more than 10 teams on the grid in the future? F1 teams have become healthier and more lucrative businesses in recent years because of a few improvements and an increase in popularity for the sport as a whole. The implementation of a budget cap in 2021, which has its negatives as we'll explain later, as well as a redistribution of prize money as part of the updated commercial agreement between teams and the F1, called the Concorde Agreement, are critical factors in managing costs and optimizing profitability for more teams. It has provided several new manufacturers and partners to a variety of teams, drawn potential new competitors to the FIA, and converted F1 into a seller's market for possibly the first time in the sport's history. MSP Sports Capital paid £185 million in 2021 for a 33% ownership in McLaren Racing, valuing the firm, which also comprises McLaren's IndyCar, Formula E and Extreme E programs, at the time at $750 million, with CEO Zak Brown saying it'll approach $1 billion in 5 years. Audi is buying 3/4 of Sauber for an undisclosed sum that is thought to value the team at no less than $600 million, and there have been rumours for months that Williams owner Dorilton Capital has placed a $1 billion valuation on the team, while Red Bull has a similar valuation for AlphaTauri. 2 years ago, when the new Concorde Agreement had been signed, when there was the talk about what is the value of a team to come into Formula One, there was a number put on that was $200 million, which seems unreachable, F1 CEO and Chairman Domenicali has said on F1's official podcast. There were teams in the past that were sold for £1. Now the market is offering almost billions to teams, and they're refusing that. Can you imagine that? Domenicali, remarking on how vital it is in his duty to treat all 10 teams equally, stated the movement in valuation puts F1's recent rise into context. Since Liberty Media acquired F1's rights, there has been a strong emphasis on transforming the sport's weaker teams into healthier, more competitive businesses. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck in 2020, the so-called franchise system accelerated, and F1 stakeholders made a concerted effort to distribute revenues more fairly, while the increasing popularity of things like the Netflix Drive to Survive docuseries made all teams more appealing to new partners. Domenicali said that F1 can only grow if most of the teams grow too, as the more you're able to have a competitive field, the more you may have interesting races, the more you can create interest in the sport. We're building important structures, important dynamics of which the more everyone is growing, the better and the stronger the business platform is that we're all working in, he said. Domenicali noted that while the financial rise of the 10 teams have been significant, it will take longer to express itself in F1's core aim of having more teams compete at the front of the grid on a continuous basis. He also stated that he feels current teams should be rewarded for their investment in F1, which is one of the reasons he's not in favour of expanding the grid at the present. I think that 10 teams are more than enough to create the show, or the business, and the attention that we want to see on the track, he said. There is an evaluation going on today that involves the FIA and us to make the right call for the future, and this is something that is also connected to the future discussions that will happen with the renewal of the Concorde Agreement. We need to remember that this expires in 2025, so there is still a long time to go. But it's an evaluation that we need to take, considering what I said, where in the past there were teams that were coming in, getting out with zero value, and now the teams are stable, very profitable, and very strong in terms of technical capability to be competitive on the track. Therefore, the right answer is that in the next months, it will be a very important point of discussion that we need to take. Do we need to stay with 10? Do we need to have more teams, or can we give the exemption to future possible teams that can be very strong to join? These are all topics that will be part of the discussion for the future. Given the championship's expansion, Red Bull Formula One boss Christian Horner believes it would be logistically very difficult to house prospective new teams within the paddock. The deadline for new F1 entrants was on May 15th last month, after a procedure initiated in February at the request of FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem. Prospective teams have been given the opportunity to apply to join the F1 grid in 2025, 2026 or 2027, with a decision on whether additional teams will be approved likely 2 months following the application deadline. The new entrant application procedure came after extensive public announcements by American racing powerhouse Andretti that it aimed to join the F1 grid. Existing teams expressed financial worries and advocated for a significant increase in the previous $200 million anti-dilution fee that any new entrant would be required to pay, especially now that the lower-end teams are already valued at $600 million to $1 billion. When questioned about the potential new 11th team, Horner underlined these monetary issues once more, but he also mentioned a logistical problem. I think the issues remain the same as 12 months ago. Fiscally, what is the incentive for an existing team or franchise to accept an 11th entrant, Horner stated. Ultimately, who pays if it dilutes the income of the 10? It's like turkeys voting for Christmas. Why would they do that? Are Liberty Media, F1's owners, prepared to pay and fund an 11th team? Are the FIA prepared to reduce their fees to help accommodate it? So there's all the financial aspects. But beyond that, with the way the sport has developed, if you look at the pit lane, for example, here, or somewhere like Monaco or Zandvoort, or some of the circuits we're now racing at, where would we be able to accommodate an 11th team? I think that in itself, operationally, where do we put the motorhomes? Where do we put the support paddock? Where do the trucks go? I just think it would be an incredibly difficult thing to be accommodated with the way the sport has evolved. Since Manor's departure from the grid at the end of 2016, F1 has had 10 teams. It had 12 teams for 3 years prior to that, after accepting 3 brand new participants ahead of the 2010 season. The Monaco Grand Prix can accommodate up to 26 Formula 1 cars, and the event last had that many in 1995. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff began his response by emphasizing that we, the existing teams, have no say in this process. The opinion that we have expressed is that it's very difficult in F1 to perform. It has taken us many years to be where we are, Wolff said. We've gone through really difficult times where F1 wasn't the blockbuster it is today. Therefore, whoever enters the sport, I think it would be beneficial for all of us if they can really bring something new to the show. If they can help us increase our audiences, or if there is a lot of marketing dollars that are being invested, similar to what we've done over the years, Red Bull and Mercedes, hundreds of millions. If that was the case, we have to be open-minded and say, how can we contribute to making that happen? But again, we're not part of the governance, and so I would very much hope that if we find someone, if we decide to go for another team, that someone can really leverage what we have today and make it greater. And whilst we're talking about the subject of money, the teams are unable to reap the benefits of the increased funds due to the cost cap. Christian Horner further said that Formula One's cost cap is forcing teams to reconsider their employment plans, particularly with relation to high-paid individuals. He urged organizations against trying to replace experienced team members with less expensive employees to stay inside the cap. The cost cap eliminates the wages of each team's top 3 personnel, normally the team principal, technical director, and one other, but includes everyone else involved in the design, production, and operation of the cars. Several teams have transferred key technical personnel away from F1 operations and onto other initiatives to avoid falling under the quota, unless part of their workdays are expressly committed to the racing plan. Horner stated that the cap makes it more difficult to retain top individuals when better offers come in, since it's impossible to match them, and has now lost personnel due to the cap. Yeah, of course it does, he said. You can't carry anybody within the team, and I think that everybody has to warrant their place within the cap. Rob was as focused on other projects in recent years, and the offer that McLaren made is probably half their cap, so you can't blame him for wanting to go and do that. When asked if there was a possibility of a pay spiral, Horner cautioned that it could also go the other way, with teams replacing a high-paid veteran with a group of lower-paid youngsters. You have to make sure it's not a race to the bottom, he said. The problem is you have long-standing personnel that have contributed a significant amount that you don't want to see forced out of their roles because of the cap, just because you can justify 10 youngsters versus an experienced hand. And that's the constant debate that you have, and where we've made redundancies through the cap. Jane Poole, the former Red Bull COO and HR director, was one of those as well. She was a redundancy that we made because we couldn't justify a role within the cap. What are your thoughts on new teams joining the grid? Would you like to see it happening? And what about their personnel? Will they just steal high-profile people from other teams, making their personnel problem even bigger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching today's video, and we'll see you in the next one.